Really happy to have Ira here. Ira Winkler is the CISO for Skyline Technology Systems and the author of You Can Stop Stupid, which I think is actually a really important message. So Ira, he's a CISP and, like I said, CISO for Skyline, and the author of the aforementioned book. He's considered one of the world's most influential security professionals and been named a modern-day James Bond. Yeah. You got some tricks for us? Some spy devices or anything like that?
The secret is there is no tricks.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll learn more about that. So anyway, I'm going to skip a lot of this here and just say we're really happy to have you here and looking forward to your presentation. And thanks for hanging around this long, and we'll try to get everybody back in here.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Anyway, hi there. Let's see, do people mind if I curse? No, if you mind if I curse, raise your hand. Actually, that nobody would. Oh, thank you. Okay, so if I come out here, is this okay? Can you guys still hear me? No, hear you in the street. Never mind. Okay. So anyway, so I was at a presentation a while ago, and if you know me, I make sure I get there just in time for lunch or so. And so what happened was I got to an event right before the lunch buffet. I get on the lunch buffet, and there were some people giving away these little stickers. And the stickers basically said, don't click on shit, except it was SH*T, but basically don't click on shit. And what happened was there was this admin type guy in front of me, and he's like, oh, I need a whole bunch of these. I got a whole bunch of people keep clicking on shit. I'm like, wow, you must give people a lot of shit to click on. And he's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, how are they clicking on shit if you're not giving it to them? Are they using their own computers or their own accounts? And you have another problem. He's like, no. He's like, well, basically stop giving them shit to click on and they won't click on it. And he was like, and I go, by the way, if you're giving them all the shit to click on and you know they're going to click on it, why aren't you stopping it after? Because you know they're going to click. He's like, well, what do you, and then, so anyway, he was just kind of mumbling and stumbling way through that, but hopefully you get the point of where I'm going with that. So let me just say on a side note, now this would indicate, for example, well, another thing I really hate, by the way, is the whole concept of the human firewall. That one just sounds so stupid to begin with. It's unimaginable. How many people think real firewalls are what you're going to rely upon or what you're going to depend your security program on? No? Then why would you want a human one, which is by definition even less going to be less reliable? People don't think of that. And then I hear people say, oh, we should make the user the last line of defense. And to me, if that's your security program, you should be fired. Because think of it this way, even if you can make the perfect human being, what happens if the user's malicious? And if you make the user your last line of defense and they are malicious, even assuming they can somehow be perfect, you again have a failed security program. But anyway, keep that in mind as I start going through this presentation because that's kind of the tone. And let's see if I work this. Okay, I did. So let's start talking about, the whole concept here. And I like to go over case studies. How many people remember the Twitter hack that happened a whole 13 months ago? I mean, I'm surprised. Usually people forget about this. I have to trigger their memory. Remember when this was going to be a wake-up call? I mean, there are so many wake-up calls we get. We keep hitting the snooze button. But anyway, what happened in the case of Twitter, some criminal mastermind, got to use my Dr. Evil quotes, criminal mastermind, basically went ahead and ended up somehow figuring out with devious ways, they tricked Twitter's system administrators into giving up their credentials. And then they were able to go ahead and essentially change passwords on accounts with tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of followers. Sorry, I don't keep track of these things, but like 100 million followers. And then, of course, this was national news. It was news all over the world, things like that. The criminal masterminds basically went ahead and used this to steal like $100,000 in Bitcoin. I mean, they just used they did a major, pretty much, this would have been a really, really cool hack. I don't mean cool and good and legal. I mean cool and, that was a clever one. But what they did was they wasted the hack. You could tell these people were morons while everybody was calling them a criminal mastermind. But anyway, how did Twitter handle this? Twitter had an engineer basically get online on Twitter, of course. Well, I think they issued a statement on their website. But anyway, they said, well, we're looking into this and we're going to really improve our security awareness program. And I'm like, if that's what you're going to do, you are so screwed. But anyway, think about this. This criminal mastermind ended up being a 17-year-old kid in his basement. He was the proverbial 400-pound kid in the basement at this point. They said they used lots of social engineering, sophisticated ways. All he did was went on LinkedIn, found out who worked at Twitter. Once they knew who worked at Twitter, then they just started contacting them through various ways. And then they did use a quote unquote man in the middle of attack, kind of, to essentially compromise the multi-factor authentication. That was a little bit clever, if you want to call it that. But then what happened was they conducted, and the man in the middle, they did the phishing attack. So big deal. And then what happened was 1,000 people inside Twitter could access the administrator tool, which allowed the password change. So when you say you're going to go ahead and start looking at password changes, and you're going to go ahead and say, oh, well, we're going to look at that and make sure these people know not to be tricked. I'm sitting there like, why does 20% of Twitter have admin privileges to change accounts with massive followers? And what happened was, and I don't know how many people remember this, but 2 years before that, there was a German contractor, and the German contractor left Twitter, and he said, screw it, somebody else should have done this by now anyway, and he deleted Donald Trump's account on his way out the door. Now, Twitter was put on notice that people could go ahead and start changing. And it seems like they might have gone ahead and put like extra protection on Donald Trump's account, but they didn't think about putting extra protection on other accounts. That's really where the problem is. Not that the users were tricked through sophisticated social engineering. Anyway, how many people remember the Cloudflare, network going down? Not as many, but this affected, give or take, about a third of the content delivery networks around the world. And what happened in this case was Cloudflare went down. When Cloudflare goes down, you kind of know it. And then instead of having just a Twitter engineer do this, the CEO of Cloudflare went on Twitter and basically said, the problem is we went ahead and some engineer misconfigured a routing table with a one-line error, and we're going ahead and trying to make sure this doesn't happen again. And somebody replied back to the CEO on Twitter and said, oh, I'd hate to be that engineer. And much to Cloudflare's CEO, because the guy can be a jerk, but in this case, Matt Prince, the CEO of Cloudflare, he gave an answer that was beautiful. His answer was, it's not the engineer's fault. He goes, he literally called it a failure of leadership, that one person making a one-line error could take down our whole network. That was really true leadership at that point, and it would have been so refreshing to hear from Twitter. Now, I like to look at other sciences, and I try to take lessons from other sciences that people, for some reason, don't know exist. Like, for example, safety science. Safety science is an immense industry. Safety science, for example, if people hurt themselves in factories, millions of dollars could be lost. So, for example, if a factory is shut down, because somebody is killed or hurt on a production line, that costs an organization money. They have hard numbers as to what it costs for an injury. They know, for example, how much their insurance rates are going to go up and so on. But anyway, even in the field of safety science, where they had to look into injuries, old school safety science, as it was called, as it's called today, because when you back then they just called it safety science. Now it's old school safety science. They were like, why was that person stupid enough to get themselves killed? And then they tried to look at it from that perspective. In other words, they looked at the proximity of the attack and said, why was this person so stupid to get themselves killed? It's the proximity's fault. That's what we're doing in cybersecurity. If a user clicks on a phishing message, we say, oh, well, gee, that user should have just been more aware. Oh, if the awareness was just funnier, that would have never happened. And all those sorts of stuff. But again, people who are ironically trying to say, oh, never blame the user, are blaming the user, because if you say awareness is the solution, that meant that the user was not aware. So therefore, it was the user's fault by your definition. But anyway, that's old school safety science. And the way people are approaching awareness today is the equivalent of old school security awareness. Well, I guess, frankly, many people have adopted new school, so technically it's just safety awareness or security awareness. So anyway, that's kind of the equivalent of saying, well, if a canary dies in a coal mine, we just need healthier canaries. Let's give the canaries gas masks because this way they won't die if they're exposed to, poisonous gas. Remember, a canary in a coal mine is supposed to die. Well, let me actually say it the other way. You don't want a canary dying of old age, right? In the middle of a coal mine. But if the canary dies, that's an indication that there is a problem with the coal mine. Let's get everybody out of there. It's not a problem with the miners. The canary in the coal mine is just there because they have a lower threshold of dying of poisonous gas. Your users are your canaries. We don't need healthier users. We need systems. We need coal mines or computer networks that are healthier, that don't put your users in danger, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. So let's talk about operational problems. And again, I like analogies if you can't figure this out. Let's say a bus driver is driving a bus and the wheel falls off the bus. Do you blame the bus driver? To a certain extent, you might, because part of the bus driver's job, theoretically, is before they take out the bus, kind of making sure the wheel is on tight or everything looks good. But generally, if a bus is not properly maintained, it's not the fault of the bus driver who just happens to be driving the bus on the day the wheel falls off. Then, likewise, look at like the medical profession. In the medical profession, what happens is hospitals and other large medical facilities, if obviously people die in hospitals on a regular basis. That's just the nature of having a hospital. But what happens is, for all the deaths that happen, they get together, and I don't want to call it, there's some word for it. It's not a tribunal, but it's essentially kind of the same thing, where they essentially have the doctor who treated the patient get up and say, well, I treated the patient, this is why they died. They especially do this during surgeries and things like that. And the doctor walks through the surgery and says this, and then all the other doctors start drilling the doctor and say, well, gee, why'd you make that decision or this decision? And when people in safety science started studying medical deaths, what they realized was, at some point in time, when a doctor did something, that doctor, at that time, that was almost in all cases the right decision to make. The problem was that the doctor was essentially led to make that decision 100 or more decisions before. Because what happened is they essentially followed a decision path, and they went down one way to another way to another way to another way, and every decision theoretically was logically the right decision. And when they started looking at, well, how did we get here? Not why did the doctor make that error at that time, but why did we get here? They started realizing that a lot of decisions happened incorrectly or were just made with wrong information 100 decisions prior. So they had to go ahead and start drilling back on why these errors happened in the first place. And it wasn't because it happened in the moment. It was like pretty much going on the wrong highway to get somewhere. So that was why those things happened. Now we're going to keep taking those lessons to what we're doing. So anyway, new school safety science basically said, you know what? If a user hurts themselves, the user is just a part of the system. The user, or the employee, the worker, sorry, I keep getting cybersecurity and safeties confused. But anyway, so if you're in the process, basically, if we adopt it to cybersecurity, the user is essentially just a part of the system. I know we love to give platitudes about the users. The users are our reason for being. The users are this, the users are that. The reality, though, is the user just happens to be the person on the keyboard in front of where a decision has to be made. And that decision could cause error. But they are just one piece of the entire system, and that's critical to understand. So anyway, any safety incident in new school safety science is a failure of the entire system. If somebody kills themselves on a factory floor, or I should say get killed on the factory floor, not kills themselves on the factory floor. If they get killed, that's a problem with the whole manufacturing process. Even if a user is pretty much grossly negligent, that is still a failure of the whole system in the eyes of new school safety science, because the system itself had to provide the user the capability to kill themselves, even if it's being grossly negligent. And that's something we have to start adopting. But more important, again, the user is just the proximity of the error, and we have to start considering that. If a user clicks on a ransomware message and explodes the network, that user just happened to be the proximity of where the ransomware was activated, not the actual cause of how it got there. And the user doesn't go around, frankly, and encrypt every bit on your network. The user just clicks a button. Your operating systems encrypt everything, not the user. And that's a critical distinction to remember. But again, the user is still just a symptom of the problem. So most people don't know. There's no reason why you would. But I'm certified as a master scuba diver trainer. And the first time I ever heard the expression, you can't, C-A-N-T, stop stupid, was in my scuba instructor training. And in the scuba instructor training, the course director came out and the course director said, you know, he just goes on a rant for a while. He's like, you know, you can't stop stupid. You know, these people, they will, no matter what you tell them, there will always be someone. Maybe it's not in every class. It'll be at least 1 in every 3 classes. Someone will always do something stupid and you always have to be on the lookout. And I'm like sitting there thinking, I'm like, our whole scuba instruction training is about stopping stupid. You know, when you start looking at what are we training people, we're not training people to do highly advanced things. Like scuba diving is actually relatively straightforward and easy. I could show you a lot of people who scuba dive that make it look like if they can learn, anybody can learn. It literally is that easy if you just don't freak yourself out. But what happens in the whole scuba industry is there we are. And like when we take somebody out into the water, we don't just take them out into the water. First, we make them take, you know, classroom training or online training, 100 hours. And really that training is just, here are lots of ways to kill yourself and here's how not to do it. And then they finally take a test. And after they show the test, a smart school will say, well, I'm going to retest them when they get here just in case they had somebody else take the test for them. We're going to retest them. Okay, they pass. Now we're going to take them to a pool. We're going to go ahead and we're going to show them equipment. We're going to first test the equipment ourselves. Then we're going to have them test the equipment. Then before we let them use the equipment, then we're going to put them in the pool. And basically when you put them in the pool, you're really not, you don't care if they know how to swim. Scuba gear makes it so you don't have to know how to swim. We just care that they don't freak out in the water. That's pretty much it. Then once they get in, we make sure they put it on right. Then they go in shallow water. Then we slowly take them down to deep water. They don't freak out. They pass everything. Then we take them to real water. And then there's a limit to how many people we could take. And then also a smart instructor will go ahead and I don't know how well you can see it there, but there's another person in the background, which is why I use the picture, because a smart instructor will bring a dive master or assistant instructor to watch, because as you can tell, the instructor's there, probably the one on the bottom right side. And that guy, he can't watch everybody, so a smart instructor will bring somebody else. But still, everything's insured. The students are insured. We're insured. The facility's insured. We know the hospitals. We know the barometric chambers. Everything's already set. And anyway, that's how you don't kill yourself. And statistically, scuba diving is safer than bowling, which is actually a true statistic, at least in one point in time. So where does the blame fall when we're actually talking about user errors? Generally, when you look at safety science kind of figures out, you know what? 90% of injuries are the result of the environment. 10% are the result of some sort of user action where everything else is okay. And what I mean by the environment, for example, you know, when people injure themselves in a factory, there was one case where like things would fall on users, people would, you know, like something would fall down. That's one case. Then there were other cases where when I do awareness programs for organizations, I always talk to the safety science people. And one time I was walking with the safety science person through a warehouse, and the guy was showing me, you see these yellow lines here on the floor? These yellow lines are new because we had a whole bunch of accidents where people were getting hit by forklifts that were driving around the warehouse. So we did all these studies, and inevitably we just spent a few $100s, painted the lines down the floor, and pretty much just about all of the injuries went away because forklifts stayed to one side, people stayed to the other, and the only injuries we now have left are people on their iPhones wandering into the forklifts, or forklift drivers on their iPhone driving into people. So that gives you an idea of where things go. And likewise, when a user does something that we say stupid user by default, 90% of the time, it's something the environment created for the user in one way or another. How many people, just for example, I will admit this, how many people ever clicked on an email message thinking you were hitting the delete or the report button, but it turns out that the cursor was lagging and it happened to be over a different button instead? I know I've done that a few times. You know, that wasn't, I mean, I would love to, I had nothing to do with that. That was not my intent. That was not the action I thought I was taking. It's just this system video was lagging, and that's why it happened. That's the environment. But what is that other 10%? Some 10% could be carelessness, blatant ignorance and things like that. You could be a lack of training. Could be ignorance, but don't underestimate malice. Again, according to the Verizon data breach report, 28% of data breaches result from user malice. That's not a trivial number. It's probably not like the real number because the data breach report's just talking about major incidents, but still a large number of incidents result from malice, and awareness is not going to stop that. If you are a security professional and you're addressing the user problem, you have to consider malice as part of the overall issue. But anyway, still, awareness might fit into certain portions of this, but still, it's only 10% of the overall problem. Another science you like to look at is counterterrorism. In counterterrorism, the fundamental concept that people have kind of settled on is the concept of boom. And boom is essentially the terrorist event. And then they keep talking about it. And even in cybersecurity, there's lots of people who keep moving, let's move left. You know, how many people heard let's move left? How many people actually know what that is? I mean, they just assumed everybody knows military technology and like all this stuff, and we don't. But anyway, moving left essentially means that you are supposed to go ahead and try to stop the event before it happens. Then right of boom in terrorism is how do you respond to a terrorist attack? So for example, in the grand scheme, and I'll move to the next slide, breaking it down a little bit more, if you're talking terrorism and real counterterrorism, boom is the attack itself. Then you have some people who are focused on prevention. Those are people, for example, like special forces people, intelligence analysts who are trying to track the terrorists down and stop the terrorists where they are, maybe conducting psyops and other things. Then you have a completely separate group of people, and that separate group of people is there, and they are responsible for things like hardening buildings, figure out how to protect airports, figure out how to protect planes. They don't care necessarily who the bad people are. They just care that they are a potential target. Where do I put barriers in? Where do I put other things in? And that's the other people doing protection. Then you have at the point of boom, you have different types of things like, okay, hardened cockpit doors, blast resistant cargo holds and things like that to try to stop the attack as examples. Then right of boom are how do you respond, recover, and resilience? In other words, how do you keep things functioning? So for example, in response, you have to first off make sure you know, do we have enough hospital space in an area? We have to know how to train first responders to respond intelligently, like unfortunately terrorists are assholes. And just like they did in Afghanistan recently, they have secondary explosions. So if there's an explosion in an area, obviously first responders want to get in there and help people, but we can't have that without trying to consider proactively, what if there's a secondary attack? And then also, what if the first attack happens to be radioactivity, biological or chemical weapons? That all has to be built in to your right of boom response plans. Then there's recovery. How do we get things up and running? And then even when that's like, okay, how do we get things back? But then there's also resilience people. It's like, okay, even if an event happens, how do we keep everything running no matter what? And one of the great things, I don't want to say, this sounds bad when I say one of the great things about September 11th, but the one thing September 11th proved was New York was an awesome city with awesome capability. The World Trade Center was a major transportation hub in and out of New York City. The World Trade Center had some of the world's financial systems embedded in it. Yet everything was able to get up and running really quickly because everything was built fairly resilient. So that was kind of like at least a good demonstration of a process. One concept I want to really introduce people to is the concept of user-initiated loss. And this is the concept that A user doesn't cause harm. A user basically possibly initiates a sequence of events that can result in harm if the system allows harm to exist. I also call it user initiated because it might mean, yes, maybe it's a lack of awareness, but it might be malice, it might be carelessness. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but how many people ever worked at an environment where you have parents who have to run out of the office at a given time because if they don't have to pick up their child, if they don't pick up their child on time, they're fined $10 a minute for every minute they're late to pick them up at childcare? You have people running around, it's like you left your desk open. It's like, I'm going to leave my desk open or I was going to be fined $100 by childcare. Which do you think I'm going to do? You know, you have to consider this. There's a concept called the compliance budget. And somebody wrote about this. I forgot their name. I should give them credit. But the concept of the compliance budget is people generally want to do the right thing. However, there are competing issues to allow them to do the right or wrong thing. So, for example, if you're running late for a meeting with your boss and you know you should lock up your computer, you have two requirements: be on time for my boss or lock up my computer. Which one is more pressing? You know, you got to consider these things when you start doing this. But anyway, user-initiated loss is the concept that a user does not create loss, and the user just takes an action that might or might not result in loss if you don't create harm. But anyway, that's kind of the principle, and keep that in mind as I start going through things. So as I start going through things, left to boom, how do we stop the user from being in the position where they can initiate a loss? In other words, do we take decision capability away from them? So if we're talking about, for example, help desk people or call center operators, they don't need everybody's information about everything. You just have to make sure they only have the right information to do the right things. This stops a lot of attacks. We don't want to empower users to do more than they can because, frankly, it can be confusing, but it also allows them to cause more harm, both intentionally and unintentionally, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Anyway, simultaneously, you know, you just want to stop the attack from reaching the user. You want to create a culture. I tell the story sometimes where I was when I worked at NSA. There was one time I was a 24/7 intelligence watch officer inside a very classified part of the National Signals Intelligence Operations Center, and I was working 24/7. And I had so we were working, tracking certain types of military units, and when we saw something, we had to get out a plotter, plugged in some numbers, which drew. So I can't tell you what it is. But anyway, it drew maps on a plotter. And what happened was, you know, it had a mechanical arm. So I had to basically take off my badge. One day, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, took off my badge, got the report out, ran to the restroom, forgot to put my badge on, run into a guard in the hallway. Got the guard in the hallway. The guard's like, "Where's your badge?" I'm like, "Right." I go, "I guess it's in my office." He's like, "We're going to your office." I go, "You're not allowed anywhere near my office." He goes, "I'll wait outside the door." So he's outside the door. I walk in. I'm looking around the plotter. I can't find my badge, looking under it. And my coworker all of a sudden is like, "Did you forget something, Ira?" I'm like, "Where's my fucking badge?" And he's like, "You mean the badge that should be around your neck?" I'm like, "Give me my fucking badge." He's like, "Where? Why don't you look hard?" And I'm like, and then the guard's like, do you think I ever forgot that badge again? No, it was the culture was reinforcing. Awareness people love to say, "Oh, that's shaming. That's horrible." No, it's the most effective awareness lesson I ever had. That, and when I was in the Marines, I remember my platoon sergeant walked in. First day we got our M16s, platoon sergeant walks in. I didn't even see him. All I heard in the corner of the room was, "You lose your weapons, you will do jail." And he walked out. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And it's like, that was the most effective security awareness lesson I ever had. I'm like thinking, what's doing jail? But anyway, you will not, there was one guy in our platoon who broke his leg where it was like bone sticking out. And he's like, "Give me my rifle, get me." And the sergeant instructor was yelling, "Shut the fuck up and get in that thing." And they were like, the guy would not leave his weapon behind. That was how effective that was. But anyway, that's left to boom. So next is governance. And this is what a lot of people, governance is not just a bunch of documents that should sit on the side of the shelf, it should sit on a shelf somewhere. Governance should tell you, if you do governance right, how every specific job should be performed properly. It should say, okay, here's why we're doing it. That's, you know, policy, but it should also say step by step, here's how to do things right. And I'm going to come back to that later. But anyway, that's critical. Moved in, now we're at the point of boom. What does the user do? Do they initiate the loss? They're presented with the opportunity. What do? This is where awareness should come in at some point. But then let's talk about awareness a little bit. Are we creating Elmer Fudd's? And what I mean by that is Elmer Fudd, if you don't know who Elmer Fudd is, I hate you, please leave now. But if Elmer Fudd was always on the lookout for the wascally wabbit, and no matter what happened, and if Bugs Bunny put on a dress, Elmer Fudd could not recognize him. What are we doing with awareness training? We're teaching people to be afraid of the hacker. The hacker's going to social engineer somebody. And you have people who are sitting there, it's like, oh, I got an email. Is this really the CEO or is that a hacker that they warned me about? That's not the right question they should be asking. The user should be asking, how do I do my job? If somebody is requesting that I send out, like, for example, we're approaching tax season soon. If an HR analyst gets an email message, supposedly from the CEO, the user should not be sitting there. Is this really the CEO or is this the hacker I heard about? They should be sitting there thinking, okay, this is asking for PII to be released to an outside party. What do I do? Well, the process for releasing PII information to an outside party is I can't do it. I have to forward all requests to my manager, and my manager then has to forward the request to the head of HR who has to get the general counsel approval. So I'm not going to respond to this because that's not my job, no matter who's asking. Because if you're looking at awareness training and you're expecting your user, essentially, think of it this way. Your users are out there against organized criminals. They're out there against sociopaths who have no moral capability whatsoever. It's not a fair fight. I'm not saying don't give awareness, but you have to give awareness for how to do your job right, not what to be afraid of, because otherwise you're just training people who can't recognize Bugs Bunny in a dress. So anyway, right, boom, the loss has been initiated. How does your system handle this? Are there additional protections? Are they predicting it? I have this slide here to kind of walk through the whole concept. I'm not going to, can I go? I think I'm late. Am I? Okay, I'm fine. Okay, I got permission to do whatever. Okay, and the laser pointer works. I'm happy. So anyway, here's your user. In order for example, a phishing message to work, stop and think about what has to happen. The user's here. But for the phishing message to get to the user, you have a malicious actor who may or may not pull from social media. They then access a botnet somewhere on the internet. That message has to go through a perimeter device. The perimeter device then evaluates the message and then has to send it to the mail server. The mail server should be looking over that message a lot. The mail server then forwards it to an email client. The email client can then say, okay, put it in an inbox or spam box. Now we have the user experience. So now that the user experience is there, the user then looks at the message. And as we have the message here, how is the user going to make it? You can have the concept of nudges, like triggering the people, like, for example, banners that say this message comes from outside the company or so on. Then you have the awareness, but awareness, again, should be driven by policies, procedures, guideline. Also, it should impact social media. They shouldn't post too much there. But then let's say the user somehow takes an action you don't want them to. The system should say warning. It's like, hey, do you really want to download an executable? That's a bad idea. Then the user says, yes, I do, because this looks like fun. Then the system should say, wait a second, I don't want to do that, because then the system, depending on the type of incident you're talking, the system basically, a phishing message, from my experience, has three usual concerns: compromising credentials, sensitive materials, or malware. In the case of malware, what should happen is the system should say, wait a second, you don't have permission to do that. The user experience should stop the user from theoretically doing it. But even if the user does do that, there should be anti-malware, which stops ransomware. But if we move to like sensitive materials, like let's say it's like, this is the CEO saying send out PII to somebody else. What should happen is, even assuming the user is not warned about that, you should have things like data leak prevention and other sorts of things on the perimeter that stop the message from going out. And also data leak prevention can be on the endpoints themselves to stop it. And then also the potential for compromised credentials, such as click on this link, give us your user ID and password to log in, things like that. And again, web content filters and different DLPs should be able to stop that as well. But does the user have really a lot to do with clicking on a phishing message and ruining the network? Again, if a user can click on a phishing message and ruin your network sucks. You've got to get that through your head. But anyway, so I came up with this concept, human security engineering, which is why the title is what it is. But basically, it goes through the concept of all the layers that I showed, because I just gave one example for phishing. I have other examples for, for example, USB drives, malicious, unsafe web browsing, a whole bunch of other stuff. But generally, when you stop and think about it, governance should be on the outside. Then in order to reach the user, you can have your technical infrastructure. In other words, your endpoints there, like, for example, DMARC, as an example, should be able to stop a lot of, malicious web traffic from going in. You have the endpoint technology, user experience. There's also, for example, things like on the technology infrastructure, SSL and TLS inspection. I gave the example of somebody just clicking on a phishing message with a malicious attachment. Lately, for example, you have a lot of smarter criminals are going ahead and embedding malware inside links that look like they're coming from safe systems such as Dropbox or Google Drive links and stuff like that. And in order to stop that, you need SSL and TLS inspection and so on. And then again, nudges, awareness, then the users. So the attacks go in through, well, basically one of my friends said it should be a bow tie, because the attacks go in like this. Then once the user makes a decision, then they should basically go out like that. So again, it has to go in through several layers and out through several layers. And this is really what it looks like. I'm not making this up. I'm just putting the concept down on a paper like this. So anyway, I'm kind of out of time anyway, but the most important takeaway is you don't want healthier canaries. You basically want a healthier mind so that the canaries aren't going to die, at least the only thing they die from is old age. So got to consider that. And anyway, my book is awesome. Buy my book. It's like 4.8 stars on Amazon.com. So it's awesome. You don't need me to tell you that. And I'm done. Thanks. Did you want me to take questions, or am I? Does anybody have a question? Yeah. Oshan. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me try to see if I could paraphrase your question for what it is, and maybe you could tell me if I have it right or wrong. Did you get to the gist of it? And you just. Okay, so when I look at the continuum of this, and so if you were, okay, so to paraphrase this question, when you're developing, designing networks or applications and so on, where is the bulk of the problem and where to address it? Is that kind of it? Okay, so to answer that question, I would say generally the further out you go, the more efficient things tend to be. So for example, when I look at secure email gateways, I get aggravated by co-fences advertising, because co-fence advertising is pretty much bad-mouthing Proofpoint. Because one message will get through a Proofpoint secure email gateway and co-fence will point it out. Now, the problem is that there are tens of thousands of email messages that a hostile message that a secure email gateway gets, maybe it'll let through like a percentage of a percent, like 0.001% or something. You're getting a lot at the perimeter because they're really good at stopping that sort of stuff. So the perimeter is really good. Then you get to the spam filters. When I look at my spam that still made it through the secure gateways and everything, spam filters, I hate the false positives, but pretty much I'd say pretty close to 100% are actually spams. But still, a lot that still has filtered out tens of thousands of them before it got to my inbox. Now it's in my inbox, and now I have to start looking at the user experience. The user experience, if we're talking about anti-malware and stuff, anti-malware, again, that stops a lot of different attacks. The user, and I'm not downplaying users, and people think I think awareness is a waste of money. Awareness is not a waste of money. Awareness is like everything else, a risk reduction tool. And you are, and the thing is, the problem is when you talk human firewall and everything, you're promising perfection. The only people who promise perfection are fools, liars, or actually a combination of both. And you should never promise perfection, because in order for a user to click on an email, all the technology before it has to fail. And if that email causes damage, all the technology after the user has to fail. So everything has to fail for a user to cause damage. But you can't promise concepts like the human firewall because you're implying perfection, and you should never do that. But to your point, though, when you look at that, security awareness, looking at the Verizon data breach report as a source, no matter what, 4% of email message or 4% of phishing messages will get clicked on. That's the statistic. So that means users have a 96% success rate. On the other hand, technology, if you architect it right, can have a 99.999% success rate. And the further out you can do it, the more effective it is. And where is the 70%? The 70% should be at the perimeter if you can get there. So, and then, sorry, much to Jennifer's thing, if you can implement a zero trust environment in the right way, like Z-Trust has their overall environment that filters everything out. That's like a good way of solving it. But if you're going to implement things in piecemeal, try to look as far away from the user with a technology implementation, and that's your best. Sorry, I beat that to death, didn't I? Okay. Any other things, or you just want the prizes? I just want the prizes too, even though I gave away the book. So thanks.